Welcome to Coyote's Corner. This episode, we'll be listening to Michael Lang tell an Algonquin tale, Mateu and the Maple Trees.
There was once a great chief, named Mateu. He was wise and kind to his people. One day, Mateu went to visit friends and family in a neighboring village. He was gone for most of the day. The sun was setting as he made his way back home, but as he drew near to the village, he could see that there was no smoke rising from the cooking fires. Alarmed that something might be wrong, he ran to his home, but his people were gone. There was no one there in the entire village. He looked in every wigwam, but Mateu could not find anyone. Where are my people? What could have happened to them? Perhaps the fishermen have returned, and all of my people are down at the river, helping to bring in the day's catch. So Mateu went down a path that led to the river bank. When he arrived, there was no one there. All of the birch bark canoes were turned upon their sides, as though they had not been used all day. The nets and the paddles, they were tucked beneath the canoes, as though they too had not been used all day. There was not even a single footprint upon the beach. Where are my people? What has happened? Mateu is becoming worried. Perhaps they are in the meadow. Blackberries are in season. Perhaps all of my people have gone to the meadow to pick blackberries. And so Mateu went through the forest till he came to the meadow. But again, he could not find any sign of his people. Where are they? What has happened? He was now becoming very worried. As he made his way back towards the village, he suddenly spied a foot in the underbrush. He recognized that foot in an instant. It belonged to one of his greatest hunters. And as Mateu parted the bushes, he saw to his horror, there was the hunter, lying flat upon his back. He had broken a branch from a maple tree and was letting the sap drip down into his open mouth. In those days, the maple sap ran thick and sweet, and as Mateu looked around, he saw all the other hunters from his village, the women, the children. They were all lying upon their backs in the maple grove, letting the sweet, thick sap drip into their open mouths. I cannot allow this to happen. I cannot allow this. If my people continue to do this, they shall become fat and lazy. Mateu had an idea. He returned to the river, where he took one of the baskets that was woven tight for holding water. He dipped that basket into the river. He filled 4 more baskets. Then he carried all 5 baskets of water to the maple grove, and one by one he carried them to the treetops. And with each tree, he popped the top off of the tree and poured the water into the trunk, then replaced the top. And when he was through, the sap was no longer thick. It was no longer sweet. His people looked to him. Mateu, what have you done? I have changed things, my people. You can still have the sweetness of the maple, but now you must work for it. You must gather the sap. You must boil it for hours, for days, and when you are done, you will only have the smallest taste of the maple syrup. Now you will appreciate the gift that the maple tree gives us. And so it is to this day. When we wish to have the maple syrup, we must gather sap by the gallon. We must boil it for hours, for days. And when we are done, we only have the slightest taste of the sweet maple syrup.
That was Michael Lang telling Mateu and the Maple Trees. I'm sitting down with Michael now to get some background on that story and see where it came from. Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely, Toby.
So, where did the story come from?
I originally heard this story when I was very young. It's part of a collection of stories in a book called Keepers of the Earth. And this book was really my introduction to a lot of the first Native American stories I heard. I've heard this story in other places, from other storytellers, from other sources. It is a story that comes from a lot of different tribes in the Northern Woodlands region. The Algonquin family of language, it's very common amongst.
So do you tell this story pretty much as you read it, or have you made some changes to it?
I have made some changes to it. For one thing, the name of the character, the chief who I call Mateu, he has many names depending on the tribe, the region. All of the names that I've encountered, I don't know how to pronounce. They have a lot of odd letter combinations in the written forms, and I never was able to wrap my brain around how it should be said And as a result, I decided to choose this name that is from the Lenape, the Delaware tribe, from their language. It is a language that I was introduced to while I was in Boy Scouts with the Order of the Arrow. A lot of the characters they use in their ceremonies are based on words from this language. And the name Mateu literally means wisdom, and I thought that was an appropriate name for the role the character plays over the course of this story.
Okay, and I know just from our previous conversations that you've actually studied some Native American languages, the Abenaki, I think it was locally.
Yes, that is one language that I have done some research into.
There's just enough variability in the languages and the tribes because it's a wide region.
Yes, so this region that's the Northern Woodlands, it stretches from the Carolinas all the way north through New England into Canada, and as far west as Minnesota. All of these languages have a common root. It's similar to how German and English and the Scandinavian languages, they all have some common overlap, but they are very different. One person speaking one of these languages would not necessarily understand what another person was saying, but they'd have the general idea, and when that's combined with the context and some sign language, it makes sense to the people speaking these languages. They're similar enough.
Okay. It's interesting how a lot of these stories have been shared with those languages as well, where you often have to take parts from one region's story, parts from another's to make something that works for you. Like
the people, the stories travel around and the stories are shared between tribes, and sometimes a story doesn't quite make sense the way that one particular group told it, or their entire version. Something has happened along the way, and we don't know how their version of the story ends.
So have you found much in the way of difficulties in selecting parts of stories from all these different areas?
With these stories, not so much, but there are other cultures where I've found that I have to dig a little bit more to find pieces of a story that can be put together.
So you talked about, taking bits and pieces from different cultures. You seem really okay with that. Is that commonly accepted in the storytelling area?
That's an interesting question because it really depends on who you ask. There are a lot of storytellers who feel that stories should be kept the way that they are told. When they hear a story, they feel like it should remain this way. My feeling is that there is a long tradition of storytellers changing stories to suit their needs, to suit their own views and their own understandings of the world. This has been going on. We know that stories have changed over time as we as a people have changed. And so my feeling is that that is the beauty of an oral story, is that it can change and it will change. And so I feel that as a storyteller, I feel that I am part of a cycle that is ongoing, and that when I add a story to the stories that are out there, someone someday will probably take my story and tell it a little bit differently. And that's okay.
It keeps growing and keeps it current, keeps people engaged with it.
Exactly.
Because I know in a lot of your digging, it's finding these very academic, very archaic renditions of these stories that were recorded, and it's almost impossible to decipher.
Yes.
And at that point, it's like the story is getting lost because it's been put behind glass.
Yes, that is a very good way to describe it.
All right, well, thank you so much for sharing this story with us.
Absolutely.
To our audience out there, thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to hear more from Michael, check out his webpage, coyotesinc.com, where you can hear a bunch of previously recorded stories, see where he's telling, and check out what's up in the world of Michael.
And as always, don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, so you never miss anything that's going on here.
And until next time, this has been Coyote's Corner. Welcome to Coyote's Corner. This episode, we'll be listening to Michael Lang tell an Algonquin tale. It's really hard to say.
It is.
Well,
I could be telling an Algonquin story about an elephant. That would make it a little trickier to say.
An awkward Algonquin tale?
That would be a very awkward.
Well, you see, the elephant never really adjusted to social interactions.
It's hard for him.
Yeah, and
he's out of his element.
People keep commenting about the long nose. It's really hard middle school.
Absolutely.
Especially with those baboons.
Those baboons, the monkeys, are really the ones you got to worry about. They're always throwing insults at everybody. They just cheater and cheater away.
Right. They've got their social cliques going on.
Absolutely.
It's hard.
They're tough to everybody, but especially the elephant.
Especially with that much baggage. I mean, if you're carrying around a trunk like that.
Absolutely. It's tough to be an elephant with a trunk. That was ridiculous. I'm glad we got that one recorded.
All right.